So I just wanted to cover this game pretty quick today. It's the ESPN Pigskin Win Totals game. And it's pretty fun. So what you do is you pick the over or the under for each NFL team's total regular season wins. Um, and at the end of the year, you're trying to get as many of them right. So you'll just go down like this as you see fit, and then you'll submit your picks. And what you'll want to do is also join a group. I'm in the Sunday NFL Countdown group. It's the largest one, and I'm also in the Sports Center group. Um, and the goal is to be as high on the leaderboard as possible. So I wanted to go over quickly my thoughts on how to achieve that um, and deal with all the data and so on. One website that you're going to find useful is going to DraftKings Sportsbook and going to the wins option here, regular season wins, and finding these odds because they will be very helpful in determining the value you can find on this web page as far as should you go over or under. So, yeah, things you'll need to do a good job in this game is you're going to need some idea of opponent pick rate, and you can get that just on the ESPN Win Totals page itself. You can just see them down here. And you're going to need something like true probabilities. And again, you can get those here on DraftKings or any other sportsbook. And you'll probably want an ability to simulate based on these bits of information, but I'm going to simulate, so you could just use my results if you want. Um, you don't have to do it, but some places you could do this, or options for doing this are like Python. I used R, but that's just what I have a background in. So you're also going to want an ability to assess performance. I just used the pure win rate, so it's the percent of the times that a given lineup won or tied for first place in my simulations. So I did want to go over quickly just this concept of leverage because it's so important in a bunch of different sports contexts and other just competitive games. All leverage is here is just the true probability that you got from the DraftKings odds, and it's minus the pick rate that you got from, say, ESPN. Um, and the pick rate it's what you predict the odds are to be for your opponents to pick a given option. And the reason you need both is because it's a measure of the value of picking an option. If the Ravens over is 52% chance according to the market, and it's being picked by the public at 80%, you have no incentive to pick the over because when you're right, everyone else is going to be right with you. But if you pick the under, you'll be right almost as much, and there's very few people who picked that. So that's the concept of leverage. And it allows us to get a quick glance at the relative comparison between the public's valuation and the market's valuation, and then capitalize on it. So, yeah. Leverage matters a lot in games with many opponents, especially stuff like DFS and Pick'em and whatnot. So, I went ahead and made a graph here. So this is the on the y-axis, you've got the sum of the leverage of every lineup that's possible. So this means I just take that basic leverage value and I sum it for all 32 teams. And as you can see, the expected correct picks is on the x-axis. So these are the highest expected correct pick lineups, and they have very low leverage, as you can see, because basically what happens in these types of games is the public is generally pretty accurate with being on the right side, but they're overextended on the right side. So maybe the Ravens are more likely to go over 11.5 than they are under, but they're so overpicked on one side that the leverage is all over here. And we'll see in which context leverage matters. So let's say I went ahead and did just a 2 opponent league, a very small thing. So there's 3 people in total, yourself and 2 opponents. You can see here that win rate, which is our ultimate goal here, it basically completely linearly corresponds with expected correct picks. When you only ever playing against 2 people, you should just pick chalk, pick the favorites. And now when we look at leverage is completely unhelpful here. You should pick the lineups up here and minimize leverage when you're only playing against 2 people. This is the results of that two-person one here. You can see at the top, you could get like a 60% win rate by picking one of these lineups. It's about twice what you would get just as a base rate, obviously, because you get 33% rate of winning if you just kind of picked, randomly or an average lineup, whereas you're almost doubling that with these lineups. Now let's jump up to 20 opponents. You can see it's still pretty linear here, but it starts to curve a little bit. Let's just even go back. See, very straight. Now curving a little bit. Leverage is starting to matter a little bit, and correct picks is mattering a little less. Leverage, again, starting to matter a little more. Here are the results. Again, these win rates are going to decline every time as the pool size increases, just because, frankly, when you're playing against like 10,000 people, your win rate is not going to be particularly high, but it can be much higher relative to the base rate of just picking an average lineup. So here it's about 4 or 5 times higher to use one of these combinations. With 200 opponents, I mean, this is radically different. You have about as high a win rate at 16.5 as you do at 18 if you just pick like all chalk. You need to get somewhere in here. And this is because leverage is starting to matter a decent bit. So if you're way down on leverage or way too over leveraged, it's hurting you. There's a nice little balance here in the middle at 200 opponents. And here's those results. I mean, you're 13xing your chances of winning by picking one of these lineups. At 2,000 opponents, it's almost flipping the other way. There's no longer a linear relationship between win rate and correct picks. You're better off being somewhere in here, and if you're not leveraged to the gills, you basically have no shot. And here, you can get like 43 to 44 times the base rate by picking these lineups. Lastly, I did 20,000 opponents. It's almost completely flipped from what it was at the start, where it was linear going from bottom left corner to the right. Now it's almost from left corner down, where if you're picking chalk, you basically have no shot. I mean, the person who's up here is 4 times as likely to win as the person down here. And again, if you're not leveraged to the gills, you really have no shot. And you can get 160 times the base rate here by using one of these lineups, which I used not these ones, but I used related ones. This is what I put in those larger leagues, just because my ultimate goal is to try to win. I'm not just interested in consistently being around 80% of the 80% of the leaderboard. I want to actually win. So this is actually giving me a shot at winning versus just consistently doing pretty well, which that's not hard to do. You just pick the favorite in every case. So yeah. Anyway, here are the takeaways from this video. Leverage is a big deal. It completely changes how you should play competitive games like this. I mean, the degree to which leverage matters pretty much entirely hinges on how many opponents you have. Simulation is a strong tool for balancing the expected correct picks and leverage and seeing how much of that matters in a given context based on how many opponents you have. And yeah, so I'm going to share the Excel file results seen here and all the resources used. You can find that in the video description, or maybe I'll put it in the top comment, something like that. So yeah, have fun with this game. I think it's pretty cool, and yeah, happy picking.